Welcome once again to Consumer Law Hub. Here's Gabriel. I had a whole bunch of people send me this story, including Stan, and I think that Lauren Fix may have been one of the first people to bring this to the attention of the public outside of Minnesota. And Lauren Fix is a syndicated radio host, content creator who talks about cars and whatnot. And this story, however, is from CarsScoops.com. Stephen Rivers with a PH wrote it. Minnesota lawmakers want to ground your classic car 5 days a week. A new Minnesota bill could ban most weekday and nighttime driving for classic cars. Now, this is kind of wild. Of course, we enjoy seeing classic cars on the road. Brings a smile to everyone's face, you'd think. But that experience might be about to become even rarer in Minnesota, because the new law, if passed, would limit classic cars to driving only on weekends or at special events. In fact, it goes so far as to limit their driving to only between sunrise and sunset on the weekends. A newly introduced Bill HF 3865 would overhaul how the state handles collector-class vehicles. On paper, much the legislation looks harmless. It updates definitions, standardizes registration language, and tweaks paperwork for everything from Pioneer plates to collector motorcycles. Under the bill, any vehicle registered with a Minnesota's collector, classic, Pioneer, street rod, or military vehicle plate could only be Dell-driven for collector purposes. That includes club activities, tours, parades, exhibitions, and similar events. Outside of those situations, owners would only be allowed to drive their vehicles on Saturdays and Sundays between sunrise and sunset. Now, keep in mind, if you've got a classic car, you can put a regular plate on it, and this wouldn't affect you. We're talking about getting the discounted collector plate. So, the state appears to be proposing a near-total ban on weekday cruising, nighttime drives, or spontaneous midweek trips for anyone with collector plates. Here's the crazy part. The law in the state is already quite restrictive for cars in this class, and collector cars, currently as it is, cannot be used for general transportation. Owners can still take their cars out for test drives, informal meetups, or the occasional evening cruise without worrying too much. But the bill would replace that flexibility with a far more rigid framework. That said, the bill also leaves some important questions unanswered. Terms like exhibition and similar use are not clearly defined, which could leave enforcement up to individual officers and then the courts. So, the bill doesn't explain why lawmakers believe these restrictions are important. It's likely tied to ensuring that people don't take advantage of the lower fees on these vehicles. Even if that's the case, it would be nice to see a little more transparency surrounding the situation. For now, it still has to pass the House, the Senate, and get signed into law, but it's in the process right now as a bill up on Capitol Hill. Now, I'm gonna let you know right now, I'm in Michigan. I'm an attorney in Michigan. Been dealing with car stuff in Michigan now for 35 years. I also own a couple cars. Right now, technically speaking, I have 2 cars that would qualify for historic plates, and I do not have historic plates on either car specifically, so I don't have to deal with this problem. And the law was modified a couple times recently in Michigan, but I'm going to let you know, the law says at MCL 257.20a, and MCL 257 is our vehicle code, historic vehicle defined. Historic vehicle means a vehicle that is over 25 years old. And like I said, I got 2 vehicles that qualify. I've got a Dodge Viper, which is a 99. I've got a Jeep, which is a 98. The oldest vehicle I own is a Jeep, but a vehicle over 25 years old that is owned solely as a collector's item and for participation in club activities, exhibitions, tours, parades, and similar uses, including mechanical testing, but not used for general transportation. So, if you want to put a plate on a vehicle that's a historic vehicle plate or an antique plate or whatever they call it, you can do that for a lot less than a regular civilian plate, except it's going to limit how you drive it. You can't use it for general transportation. But a lot of people complained about that language, and they added language to it. I did a video back at the time. It happened a couple years ago because in Michigan, see, people in the southern states don't understand about snow. In Michigan, we have a period of time where there can be snow on the roads, pretty much from September through April. And you don't want to drive your car in the snow if it's a nice car. For a couple reasons. One of which is we salt our roads. we salt our roads liberally, like it's cheap popcorn at a movie theater. And so the salt on the roads is corrosive and will chew up and spit out your car. And so you don't want to drive your car in those conditions. So when spring hits and the snow melts and you get a couple good rainstorms that wash the streets clean, and then the sun comes out and you've got dry, clean pavement as far as the eye can see, you want to go out, get in your car, and take it for a drive. Well, are you taking it to a parade or a mechanical testing? Are you taking on a tour, an exhibition, a club activity? I don't belong to any clubs. What are you talking about? And so people are saying that's so unfair because as it is, we can't drive our classic antique cars for so long. And so, believe it or not, in Michigan, they added a sentence to the statute that says, for purposes of this section, use of the vehicle during the period from Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day each year is considered an exhibition. So we got these restrictions, but they're all lifted between Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day. And that right there is the good, meaty part of cruising season in Michigan. And when they added that, people were like, okay, we're good. Now, it's true. I've had both my cars out. I've also have a civilian plate on my Cobra replica, which is not old enough to qualify, but don't worry about that. But I'm saying that I've got nice cars that I want to drive when it gets nice out. I've had them both out already. In fact, I believe I had them both out in March, which I did. Yeah, March wasn't that long ago. And so the fact of the matter is that if, which I don't, but if I had historic vehicle plates on my Viper or my Jeep and had driven it before Memorial Day, well then it would have had to been being driven for a club activity, an exhibition, a tour, a parade, or a similar use, and including mechanical testing. And so some people are going to say, but Steve, first time in the year, you pop off the battery tender and you take it off to drive. Make sure that everything's okay with it. Isn't that mechanical testing? Well, the problem is that if you could say that anytime you're driving it, you're just checking it for mechanical testing, then that subsection would be kind of hard to enforce or define. So that's a problem. But I'm also going to let you know that I had an M35A2 Deuce and a half Army truck a few years ago. I don't have it anymore, and I miss it, but sad. But I had this Army truck, and I bought regular plates for that vehicle also, because I knew that there's no way I can drive down the road in this 14,000B monstrosity without everyone going, oh, look at that. And I don't want the police going, oh, look at that. I wonder how that's plated. So I had regular plates on it, and I drove that thing everywhere. I drove it from Detroit to Copper Harbor twice, and those long rides are tough on every part of your body, including your ears. And never once got pulled over on it. I can tell you that I once did have a police officer pull up my driveway when I had my garage door open. He could see the truck, and he walks up and he goes, "Is that your truck?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's cool." Because I served and I spent a lot of time in the back of one of those. I said, well, I get to drive it because I own it, so I don't spend my time in the back. I spend my time up front. And he said, "Are you interested in having it in a parade?" I said, "I'd love to." And he said, "Okay." And I actually drove my Army truck in a parade, which was a lot of fun, and it had a civilian plate on it. If it didn't have a civilian plate, driving it in the parade would have been fine, and I'm assuming driving to and from the parade also, that kind of thing. But like I said, I did not buy those plates for my vehicles that qualified simply because I don't ever want to have to make the argument. I think I'd win the argument, but I don't want have to make it. And but there are people out there who've got cars that they drive like 3 times a year, and the rest of the time they spend working on it, polishing it, cleaning it up, making even nicer, and they enjoy the car. And I'm not knocking anybody who does that because I know there's people out there like that. And if you've got a car like that and you only drive it a few times a year, it's kind of a hamper on your fun when you realize that, oh, I can only drive it for these following purposes on these particular time frames. And next thing you know, you're out and a police officer pulls you over and goes, "It's past sundown." And you're like, "Is it really like it's getting dark? I thought it was dusk." No, it's past sundown. I didn't want to have that argument, that discussion with anybody. So, that's what I did. But if I was in Minnesota right now, I'd be up in arms about this, only because it is so restrictive that it seems punitive. And the guy who wrote the article, Stephen Rivers, says that they don't explain why they're doing this. And interestingly, legislators don't always explain why, but sometimes they do. Many federal laws in particular will have a preamble that will say things like, in order to promote competition and to prevent unfairness in the market and to protect consumers, the following law has been passed. And they'll say that that's the purpose of it. Now, whether a state does that or not depends on the state, depends on all kinds of other things, but it's pretty clear what they're doing here. And I think most people understand this, that they are looking at all of the collector plates they issue every single year. And they're saying, okay, out of all these plates, are they all being used properly? And let's face it, some of them are not. Some of them are not being used properly. And so what they're going to do is go, okay, let's flip it the other way. Make them extremely useless as plates go. And if you want to drive your classic car more often, get a regular plate. And of course, they'll raise revenue. This is all about the revenue. That's all this is. So, what needs to happen in Minnesota? If you don't want this bill to pass, if you're there, contact your legislator. Let them know that you are very concerned about this law and that you think that they should not pass the law because of the fact, and explain to them why. Be nice about it. By the way, it goes a long way. You don't want them to think, oh, only crazy people are against this law. So, there you go. Minnesota lawmakers want to ground your classic car 5 days a week from carscoops.com. Stephen Rivers wrote that. Stephen with the PH. And by the way, that's an old joke on this channel. It goes back, probably it's the beginning of time, which by the way, I believe yesterday was the 12-year anniversary of my channel. But the joke is that I was at a deposition once, and I was asked to put my appearance on the record, and I said, Steve Liato, Low, which is common, you spell out your last name. And the court reporter said, is that with a V or a PH? I said, you can only spell Steve with a V, Steve Leto, L-E-H-T-O. And she goes, yes, but Stephen with a V or a PH. I said, it's not Stephen, it's Steve. And she looks at me, she goes, what's your driver's license say? And I go, none of your business. My name is Steve. Call me Steve. She goes, yeah, but it's Stephen, isn't it? I go look up the bar journal. It's Steve. It's my professional name. I use Steve. I don't care what my mom yelled at me when she's angry at me. Okay, I chose to use Steve. It can only be spelled with a V. Okay, so the running joke is that not everyone spells their name Stephen with a V or a PH, but I spell my name Steve, which is only with a V. But Stephen Rivers here is a Stephen with a PH, but some people might call him Steve. I don't know, but he called himself Stephen here, so I'll go with that. Questions or comments, put them below others. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. The beaten path is the safest, but the traffic's terrible.